From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Top of the morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. An exciting show for all of y'all today. A lot to talk about. So stay tuned, buckle up. We've got it. Let's get going. So before we get started on this morning's show, and by the way, Tuesday, October 15th, 2024, what a time to be alive as we watch human civilization advance so fast, yet not lose its main characters as human civilization. We'll get into that on today's episode because there's a lot to talk about. Join me for my double espresso. Again, clear glass this morning because you can see that. And, you know, you can't see this live, but it's hot. Right, like you might be able to see the steam on here with all the lights, though it's not very good. At some point, this podcast will be big enough to where I can have a proper studio and not just my home office. Till then, coffee cup cheers. Thanks for tuning in. Whew, that was hot, like way too comfortable. Yeah, like just way hot. All right. Let's kick off with, remember National Public Data? You know, the guys that do the background checks that kind of everyone was like, yeah, these are the guys. Well, they filed for bankruptcy as a result, a direct result of the fallout from their cyber attack. Now, before the comments here go crazy, there's a few things I want to underline here. One, it's always very troubling for me when a victim of a crime goes out of business, because there are hundreds of employees who, due to a cyber attack, no longer have a job in our economy today. So just want to preface that. I realize a lot of people are going to write about this and then kind of put stuff out there. But stop there for a moment. And there's a lot of employees there that have lost their jobs as a result of this data breach. So the president of, I guess the parent company's name, Jericho Pictures, a weird name for a company who owns National Public Data. They filed for a Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the Southern District Court of Florida on October 2nd, so nearly a week and a half ago. Its president, Salvatore Verini Jr., made the filing, saying that in addition to the federal and state level investigations, several class action lawsuits have been filed since the news emerged of the data breach. They're one of the biggest background check companies. They allow their customers to search billions of records with instant results. The case management summary submitted alongside the bankruptcy filing, the company said a large portion of their business serves healthcare institution and prohibits the entry of individuals with background issue. The company admitted in August that a December 2023 data breach was the source of many of the personal information that was being sold on the dark web back in April of this year, and then again throughout the summer. Some of the information in the registry, like names, social security numbers, phone numbers, addresses, dates of birth, were all included in the leaked database. National Public Data said it had cooperated with law enforcement and government investigators examining the incident, but did not provide details since. The bankruptcy comes months after the company sent its data breach notice to regulators in Maine that 1.3 million people's information had been leaked, but it's really not 1.3, it's 2.9 billion records on U.S. citizens. The bankruptcy filing explicitly names the hacker U.S. DoD, and we should say criminal. He's had a great deal of success breaching other institutions, including the FBI, Airbus, and TransUnion. So they're kind of trying to, say, look, he went after big guys. Who are we? The company itself, though, says that it has between 50 to 99 creditors. The vast majority of those listed in the bankruptcy filing are attorney generals from almost all 50 states, including all 4 U.S. territories: Guam, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, the North Mariana Islands, and D.C. They don't show how much is owed to each state. Another part of the filing says the company has liquidated debts worth less than $3 million. Only Missouri has come forward publicly saying it's investigating the breach. But the bankruptcy document says regulatory agencies are currently investigating and demanding substantial attention to resources to respond. 20 states are levying civil penalties for the breach. The FTC may issue fines, according to the company. The reputational impacts they've essentially lost all their customers. They can't derive sufficient revenue to address some of the liabilities, not to mention defend the lawsuits, support the investigations, and the debtor's insurance has declined coverage. They maintain no dedicated physical offices, and Vernie runs the company out of his home in Pompano Beach, using independent data centers to house much of the company's infrastructure, meaning he did not have a CISO. He didn't have a real advanced tech team. It appears that he's built this business. And by the way, the business was fairly profitable, right? If you think of a small business, I mean, this was being attributed to one of the largest background check companies, but in 2022 he had gross revenue of 746,000 that went up to 1.15 million in 2023, and just this year he made 431,000 from January to October. So he was down. He obviously had all these liabilities, and so he's now filing for bankruptcy. He says that all in all, they only have around $40,000 worth of assets held in a Flagstar bank account and around $5,400 worth of technology equipment, mostly Dell computers, cameras, and servers. And so it's declared the losses to be a loss of about $1 million. So significant. The reason I focus on the story is because there's a lot of takeaways from this. One, it just shows you the lack of diligence by companies who were using this service in terms of what they had. Now, I don't have the full picture. I actually looked up the bankruptcy filing. This was really, really good, kind of in terms of giving us a good summary here by the record. But I'm still doing my own kind of being curious as a CISO. What I want to understand is who your customers were, and were you falsifying, or were they just ignoring the risks that exist with using a service like this? And I get all the regulators and everyone jumping on this now and wanting to kind of levy fines and sue the company, but you've sued a small business out of business. And so it's kind of like, what are you doing? Now, if there was clear negligence, by all means, go for it and make an example. If this was kind of swept under the rug, then I think we have a greater systematic problem. And I tend to lean to the latter rather than saying this was malicious to begin with. So national public data going out of business, a direct result of a cyber attack. We've seen some of these. The HVAC company that was kind of behind the Target breach back, 10, 12 years ago. So we've seen these small businesses get impacted. Those are the ones that go out of business. But when it terms kind of like headline news, this might be one that might be really beneficial for practitioners to kind of talk about it as caution when it comes to supply chain security. Because what's going to happen is these lawyers are now going to say, all right, we want discovery, whatever you can give us. They're going to fight this in court, right? In terms of the bankruptcy proceedings, they're going to find out, all right, who was using you and do they have money? And if they were using you and do they have money, then can we sue them? So mind you, kind of keep that in mind there as well. We're going to keep this going. This isn't going away. We'll keep watching this. Criminals are actively exploiting several critical vulnerabilities within the Fortinet ecosystem. So let's go ahead and kind of talk about that. CISA and federal authorities are all warning that there's a string of vulnerabilities in 4 Fortinet products that are under active exploits. The most common one is CVE 2024-23113 that's been added to the KEV catalog that has a vulnerability of 9.8. Exploitation of the vulnerability OS would allow remote unauthenticated attackers to execute arbitrary codes or commands in the system, according to the FortiGuard blog that was released on Friday. Fortinet is offering some guidance for some workarounds to remove the FortiGate and FortiManager protocol access, all of which are vulnerable. Forti products have faced heightened threat activity this year. The company disclosed active exploitation of CVE 2024-21762, which was an out-of-bounds write vulnerability in FortiOS. Shadow Server Research says 87,000 Fortinet IPs were likely vulnerable to this as of Sunday. More than 14,000 of the exposed and likely vulnerable instances were reported to be in the U.S. The vulnerable impacts and the following products are all impacted by these vulnerabilities. So if you're on these versions or in these products, you may want to pay close attention. Fortinet FortiOS versions 7.4.0 to 7.4.2, 7.2.0 to 7.2.6, and 7.0.0 to 7.0.13. If you're using Fort Proxy versions 7.4.0 to 7.4.2, 7.2.0 to 7.2.8, and 7.0.0 to 7.015. FortiPAM versions 1.2, 1.1, and 1.0, and Forti Switch Managers versions 7.2.0 to 7.2.3 and 7.0.0 to 7.03. So all of these need to be addressed ASAP. We'll stick around with China because they're the ones that are actively exploiting these. So China, Fortinet believes that the state-sponsored actors behind what's happening to Ivanti, again, Ivanti, I mean, I guess people are in a like repeat punishments. I get that. Won't stop, can't stop. Talking about how bad Ivanti just is as a product, right? Like repeated and threat actors and nation states just absolutely abusing it. So last week we talked about the cloud service application product. I think that was on Thursday of last week's show. The main flaw, CVE 2024-819-0, would allow remote code execution. However, exploitation of the vulnerability requires elevated privileges. Attackers are chaining it with additional CVEs, and Fortinet is saying that they began investigating an attack detected in a customer environment where the existence of only CVE 2024-819-0 was publicly known. According to the firm, the attackers compromised systems using the Zeroday, then conducted lateral movement, deployed web shells, collected information, conducted scanning and brute force attacks, and abused the hacked Ivanti appliances for proxy traffic. They were observed deploying a rootkit on the appliance, likely in an effort to maintain persistence, even if a device was reset to factory settings, letting you know, rip, replace, and possibly with something better. Just do that. Save yourself the trouble. All right, CMMC 2.0 is here. Finally, the DoD is empowered to start testing its defense contractors after CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program, kind of 1.0 really was stagnant. There was a lot of issues with it. It was complex. Although Katie Arrington, who developed it, would defer, and to be honest, she may have some points. However, CMMC was kind of redone after she left the Air Force, and the final rules now apply with part of the Federal Acquisition Regulations of 52.204-21, NIST Special Publications 800-171 Revision 2 and 172. So the evolution of the program really kind of started in January of 2020. After SolarWinds, it was being worked on, but it was kind of released and put into place in November of 2021. Refined from 4 rules to 3 levels of CMMC. Then the department published proposed rule to amend it in the Federal Register. So all in all, now you achieve compliance. Level 1 is a self-assessment for the basic protection of federal, essentially, systems. Number 2 requires the general protection of essentially some of the government systems, as well as demonstrated by third-party assessment or self-assessment at CMMC level 3. Level 3 is the higher protection from advanced persistent threats, with assessments led by the DIB Cybersecurity Assessment Center. So all in all, the final version of the program clearly identifies the 24 NIST 800-172 requirements mandated for level 3 certifications. So there's some self-assessments to this. There's third-party assessments, again, trying to defend specific assets of the federal government. Again, good thing there as well. Gryphon Healthcare and Tri-City Medical Center disclosed a data breach in which personal information of more than 500,000 individuals was stolen. The Texas-based billing service provider is notifying 393,000 individuals of an incident that occurred on August of this year, which involved an unnamed partner that Gryphon provides medical billing services for. The third-party breach led to a threat actor accessing files containing information about the patients for whom Gryphon provides medical billing services. The company notes in a notification letter to the impacted individuals that a copy of that letter was submitted to the Maine Attorney General's office. According to Gryphon, names, addresses, dates of birth, social security numbers, dates of service, diagnostics, and health insurance information, treatment and prescription information, provider details, and medical record numbers were all compromised in the incident. Gryphon has no evidence to suggest that any potentially impacted information has been misused because of the incident. They're providing 12 months of free identity theft protection services. Tri-City, which is based in Oceanside, California, they're a full-service acute care public hospital. They've notified that 108,149 people were impacted by a year-old data breach, most likely one of the file share data breach there. JamesCesar.substack.com. You can find all the latest writing there as well. Go check it out. Subscribe for free on our Substack. Google is backing the construction of 7 nuclear power reactors in the U.S. to help feed the need for electricity to power AI and jumpstart some of the U.S. nuclear revival. Now, these aren't the behemoth bespoke nuclear plants, but rather very small kind of micro nuclear plants that are designed to power data centers that are going to be supporting AI. And that's huge, folks. You have to understand, when we talk about AI and powering all of this stuff, someone who's in utilities, I can tell you, we don't have enough power on the grid today, based on predominantly not because the grid can't produce it, but because of regulations that are in place that really kind of limit the production of power in power plants. And power plants have a specific push of megawattage that they can push out into the grid. And obviously civilian usage trumps this type of usage. Well, you're not going to get to quantum with the current power that we have, and you're definitely not going to get to the utmost power of AI. And our adversaries produce power plants and are building power plants based on coal and nuclear all over the world. They're really kind of beating us in that field, which could potentially lead to a transitional shift in tech advancement, which could be really, really bad. So Google, for their end, are doing this. And this is big because for a lot of reasons. One, you're understanding where Google's putting its money and where data centers are going and so forth. And so this, again, is bringing about, and you're seeing the deals that are being done by energy providers like Constellation Energy and Microsoft in Pennsylvania's 3 Mile Island to kind of bring back those nuclear power plants to power these massive data centers that are going to require a lot of energy. And that energy is definitely going to be something we're going to need in order to really kind of deal with AI. So Kairos plans to deliver the reactors between 2030 and 2035. The financial terms were not disclosed. However, there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff in here with these kind of micro nuclear power plants. Kairos says that 2 75 megawatt reactors, will include a single 50 megawatt reactor with 3 subsequent power plants. Each will have about 75 megawatts. So again, those will power data centers and the advancement of tech. And if you're in cyber, pay close attention to this. A new supply chain risk has just introduced himself into your environment. And as we wrap up here, Firefox patched a bug that was being exploited against Tor browser users. That bug, CVE 2024-90680, would allow attackers to execute malicious code within the browser's content process. So that's been patched up. Jetpack released a critical security update addressing a vulnerability that would have allowed a login user to access forms submitted by other visitors to the site. Jetpack, a popular WordPress plugin that provides automatic tools to enhance website functionality, security, and performance. According to the vendor, the plugin is installed on 27 million different websites. The issue was discovered during an internal audit and impacts all Jetpack's versions 3.9 or 0.9 released back in 2016. So now that's done for. And finally, venture capital investments in cyber slid 51% from the previous quarter to $2.1 billion in the third quarter of this year, according to Crunchbase data. The latest rounds of $100 million or more were down considerably in Q3, according to Crunchbase, with Q2 and compared to Q2, when 10 cyber startup closed rounds of more than 100 million, the money is kind of drying up with a lot of attention going into AI. So keep that in mind. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow with a whole lot more live at 9 a.m. Eastern with all the latest and greatest. Until then, please make sure to check out our podcast. Go check out our Substack, jamescesar.substack.com. Subscribe, follow, and most importantly, all, a great rest of your day and stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.